They say marriage changes you, but no one told me it starts by deleting yourself one piece at a time. When I met Daniel, he felt like the calm I had been praying for. Tall, soft-spoken, the kind of man who prayed before eating and said, "My woman will never suffer." Legos can make you crave peace more than love, and Daniel looked like peace wrapped in a suit. In the beginning, everything he did felt thoughtful. He opened car doors, texted me scriptures, told me to sleep well, my crown. I didn't notice the subtle things, how he flinched when I laughed too loud, or frowned when I interrupted him mid-conversation. Love makes red flags look like roses. One evening, while scrolling through Instagram beside him, I laughed at a funny reel. He took my phone gently and said, "You don't need social media, baby. You have me." He said it like a compliment. I remember smiling, deleting the app that night to prove my loyalty. My best friend sent a message the next day. "Girl, why did you go off again?" I typed, "Just taking a break." But it wasn't true. I was taking orders, calling them love. When we got engaged, everyone said I was lucky. My mother told me, "You've found peace. Just keep your home. Always keep your home." I didn't realize keeping a home could mean losing yourself inside it. The first month after our wedding, Daniel asked me to stop wearing red lipstick. "It draws too much attention," he said. The next week, it was my heels. Then my friends. Then my laughter. Every suggestion sounded like care, until my world shrank to the sound of his voice. And I told myself it was normal, that this was how women kept marriages, that submission was sacrifice, and sacrifice was love. But every night, when I lay beside him, I felt a quiet panic crawling beneath my chest, like a warning I was too afraid to listen to. I thought I had found peace. I whisper now, looking back. But peace that costs you your voice is just silence in disguise. That was the first thing I deleted for love. I didn't know I'd delete myself next. They told me the secret to a lasting marriage was simple. Be patient, be silent, and always kneel first. My mother said it. The pastor's wife repeated it. Even my aunt, who once left her husband for cheating, whispered, "Endure. All men test their wives before they change." So I learned endurance like a prayer. The first real argument Daniel and I had was about nothing, literally nothing. He'd asked for yam instead of rice, and when I told him we didn't have any, his eyes hardened. He didn't shout. Daniel never shouted. He just sighed, deep and slow, like disappointment. Then he said the words that would echo through our home for months. "A good wife doesn't raise her voice, even when she's right." That night, I went on my knees beside the bed to apologize. For what, I wasn't sure. But I cried, said sorry 5 times, and promised to do better. He smiled, touched my head gently, and said, "That's my wife. You're learning." Learning what, exactly? How to shrink. How to survive. At work, my laughter used to fill the office. My boss once said, "You light up the room." But now, even my colleagues noticed the dimming. One asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "Marriage just makes you calmer." But calm was just another word for erased. Daniel began setting rules that sounded like protection. No male colleagues calling after 8 p.m. No wearing fitted dresses to work. No travel for office retreats without his approval. Each rule came wrapped in love. "I'm just protecting you, baby." And I believed him. Sometimes he'd pull me close and say, "You know, women with quiet spirits make the best wives." And I'd nod, even though the silence was killing me. One Sunday, during service, the pastor preached about submission. Daniel's hand tightened around mine, as if to remind me who I belonged to. I looked at the women around me, heads bowed, lips muttering, And for the first time, I wondered if we were all just different versions of the same caged bird. Peace isn't the absence of noise, I whisper now. Sometimes it's the sound of your spirit surrendering. That night, Daniel kissed me and said, "You make me proud." But my reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, quiet, beautiful, and completely gone. By our first anniversary, I had mastered the art of silence. I knew when to smile, when to apologize, when to look down. Peace, I thought, was predictable, until my boss called me into his office with news that should have made me scream with joy. I'd been chosen to lead a new PR campaign for an international brand, the kind of project that could triple my salary and put my name on the industry map. I remember driving home, grinning so hard my cheeks ached. Daniel would be proud, I thought. He'd always said he wanted a woman of value. But when I told him, he went quiet. Too quiet. He sipped his drink, stared at the TV, and said, "You're too ambitious, Nkem. Who will raise the kids if you keep chasing promotions?" I blinked, confused. "We don't even have kids yet," I said softly. He shrugged.
Exactly.
"You're too busy to even think of that." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment in my head, how his pride turned into irritation, how joy turned into guilt. By morning, I had convinced myself he was right. Maybe I was losing focus. Maybe this was God's way of telling me to slow down. So I called my boss and turned down the offer. I said something about family balance. He paused for a long time before saying, "Nkem, you're one of the best. Don't shrink for anyone." I laughed to hide the sting, but his words stayed with me. Days passed, and Daniel began correcting everything, my tone, my dress, even the way I greeted people. "You're a married woman, not a temptation," he'd say whenever I wore something fitted. "You don't need to go for lunch with male colleagues. Eat here, with your husband." The walls of our home started to close in, slowly, politely. It wasn't prison, it was prettier than that. It smelled like stew and expensive perfume, but it held me all the same. One evening, I stood by the window watching the traffic on Lekki Ape Expressway, red lights stretching into infinity. And I realized something terrifying. I missed myself. The version of me that used to dream, argue, and walk into meetings with bold lipstick and louder laughter. That woman was gone. A week later, Daniel came home angry. I had posted a picture of a book I was reading, Becoming by Michelle Obama. He looked at it and scoffed. "You women and your Western nonsense. That's how rebellion starts." "It's just a book," I said quietly. "Books like that make wives forget their place," he replied. That night, I stared at him sleeping beside me, peaceful, satisfied, and wondered how a man could feel so safe in a house he'd set on fire. I walked to the mirror and stared at my reflection. No red lipstick. No smile. Just emptiness. I touched my face and whispered, "Who are you?" I thought he was protecting me. I say now. I didn't realize he was building a cage. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like mourning. I used to think heartbreak came suddenly, a loud shattering, a scream, a betrayal you could point to. But in my marriage, heartbreak came quietly, like slow poison, like whispers you learn to live with. It started with the calls Daniel wouldn't take in my presence. He'd smile faintly, stand up from the couch, and walk into the corridor. Sometimes I'd hear his voice soften, that tone he hadn't used with me in months. When I asked, he'd say, "Work call, baby. Don't start your suspicion drama." And I'd nod, even when my gut twisted. Then came the late nights. He started coming home past midnight, smelling of cologne I didn't own. His shirt collars sometimes carried a faint shimmer, like lip gloss. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. Because what did the world tell women like me? Men are polygamous by nature. Just pray harder. Don't embarrass your husband. Protect your home. So I prayed. I prayed with the same desperation as someone holding a crumbling wall with her bare hands. I begged God to change him, to make me more patient, more understanding. Because in this society, when a man cheats, they ask what the woman stopped doing right. One evening, after another argument over nothing, Daniel snapped. "You used to be peaceful, Nkem. Now you nag. You've changed." I wanted to scream that I changed because he killed every version of me that smiled. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry." And that was the night I realized I was apologizing for breathing wrong. The next morning, I decided to talk to someone, our pastor's wife. She had always smiled at me in church, calling me our virtuous woman. When I told her everything, the isolation, the accusations, the cheating rumors, she held my hands and said gently, "Marriage is warfare, my dear. Every wife fights on her knees. If your husband cheats, pray harder. That's how you win him back." I remember staring at her nails, painted a perfect shade of nude, and thinking how neat oppression looked when it dressed up as advice. She said I should fast for 7 days.
So I did.
But my prayers changed. At first, I prayed for Daniel to return to me. By day 3, I prayed for strength. By day 5, I prayed for peace. And on the 7th day, I didn't pray for him at all. I prayed for clarity.
Clarity came.
Not as light, but as heartbreak. That Sunday, after service, Daniel took me out for lunch. We sat in silence until his phone rang. He smiled, that same secretive smile, and turned it face down. I don't know what broke in me, but I asked, "Who's she?" He froze, then laughed. "You're paranoid now? You see why I say you read too many books? Every man needs peace, and you used to be mine until you became stubborn." The words hit harder than any slap could.
Peace.
That word again. A word that had chained me for years. When we got home, I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. There was no bruise on my skin, but I looked battered. Not from fists, but from years of being small. I thought of my mother's voice. A woman who endures is a strong woman. And for the first time, I disagreed. Endurance wasn't strength. It was slow suicide wrapped in cultural ribbons. That night, while Daniel snored beside me, I wrote in my journal, "I am not crazy. I am not rebellious. I am a woman who forgot she was human." Then I closed it and whispered into the dark, "God, if this is what marriage means, I'd rather be single and sane." I didn't leave that night, not yet. But something shifted. The fear that once held me began to crack. They called it marriage, I say now, but I called it survival. And that was the night I stopped praying for him to change. I started praying for the courage to leave. The day everything changed didn't come with thunder or drama. It came on a calm Saturday morning, sunlight slipping through the curtains, the smell of jollof rice in the air, and Daniel's phone buzzing endlessly on the table. He was in the bathroom, humming like a man with no secrets. I'd never touched his phone before. "Trust is the foundation of love," he always said. But that morning, something inside me whispered, "Check." The message app was open. Not texts, voice notes. From a friend of his, someone he often hung out with. I pressed play. "Guy, that your wife, she too worship you. You don't win jackpot." Daniel's voice followed, smooth and proud. "She thinks I love her. I just love the way she worships me." I froze. The rice on the fire started to burn, and I didn't even move. It wasn't anger that hit me first, it was shame. Shame that I had knelt, begged, fasted, and erased myself for a man who saw me as a trophy of submission. He stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, humming. I smiled. Not because I was fine, but because I was done. That day, I began to plan my exit quietly, like a soldier preparing for a silent war. I opened a secret bank account at work, started saving a portion of my salary before he could help me manage it. I reconnected with my old colleagues, one of whom offered to get me back on a PR contract. I told no one, not even my mother, because in this country, a woman's decision to leave is everyone's business except hers. For weeks, I played the perfect wife. Cooked his favorite meals, smiled when he wanted, prayed when he asked. Each smile was a step toward freedom. Each, "yes, honey," was a weapon disguised as obedience. One evening, I sat with him watching TV. He placed his hand on my lap and said, "You've been so peaceful lately. I told you marriage gets easy when a woman submits." I smiled and replied softly, "You were right, but in my heart, I was already gone." I spent nights quietly packing little things, one dress, one file, one book at a time. By the 3rd week, I had moved most of my belongings to a friend's apartment. He never noticed. He never noticed me anymore, just the quiet. One night, I recorded myself speaking into my phone. Not a message to him, to myself. "You are not weak for leaving," I said. "You are not sinful for wanting peace. You are allowed to start over." That was the night I truly began to breathe again. For the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. Without waiting for footsteps in the hallway. Without rehearsing apologies in my mind. Daniel didn't know it yet, but he had already lost me. Not when he cheated. Not when he mocked me. But the day I stopped defending him in my prayers. For once, my silence wasn't fear. I whisper now. It was strategy. By morning, I had set a date. The day I would finally walk away. Not to make a statement, but to save my life. And when that day came, I didn't pack chaos. I packed peace. The morning I left, the city was still half asleep. The streets were soft with mist, the sky undecided between night and day. I didn't cry. I didn't write a note. I simply picked up my bag, closed the bedroom door quietly, and walked out of a house that had stopped feeling like home long ago. I moved into a small apartment in Suralere, 1 bedroom, peeling walls, but it smelled like freedom. For the first few nights, I jumped at every sound, expecting his knock. But Daniel didn't come. Not immediately. Instead, he called. Dozens of times. I ignored everyone. Then the messages began. You're embarrassing me. A good wife doesn't walk away. Come back before people start talking. But people were already talking. Some said I was possessed by modern feminism. Others said I'd met another man. My mother cried over the phone, asking, "What will people say?" And I answered softly, "Maybe it's time they said something true." Weeks passed. My peace grew louder. I started writing again, taking new PR jobs, laughing without apology. The mirror no longer frightened me. It showed a woman I finally recognized. But while I was healing, Daniel was performing. He went to church the following Sunday and stood before the congregation, head bowed, voice trembling. "Please, brethren, help me pray for my wife," he said.
She's lost.
"The devil has taken her heart away from our marriage." He shed tears, real or rehearsed, I'll never know, and the congregation gasped in sympathy. Some women even knelt beside him, praying for my deliverance from rebellion. By evening, my phone was full of messages from church members. "Sister Nkem, the pastor says you should come home. Don't let pride destroy your marriage. Every home has battles. Fight on your knees." I didn't reply to any, because what they didn't know was that I'd already fought on my knees and nearly lost myself in the process. That same week, Daniel tried to fill the silence I left behind. He invited a woman over, someone he'd been flirting with, maybe from church, maybe from work. My neighbor, an older woman who sold provisions downstairs, saw her arrive in a red car. She told me later, smiling knowingly, "Your husband brought one fine girl to cook for him." But the girl told him she doesn't cook for men unless she's paid. I could imagine the scene perfectly. Daniel, sitting in the living room with that cold stare, trying to command her like he used to command me. And the girl, nails painted, scrolling through her phone, replying casually, "If you're hungry, you better order food. I don't do wife duties for free." He must have been stunned, because control was the only language he spoke fluently, and now nobody was listening. The next day, he tried again, sent a message through my mother. "Tell your daughter to remember her vows." My mother called, crying. I listened quietly and said, "Mama, I did remember them. He's the one who forgot what love meant." Then one Sunday afternoon he came. He didn't come alone. He came with his mother and our pastor. I watched from the window as they stood at the gate, dressed like an intervention. He spoke first. Calm, rehearsed. "You've made your point, Nkem. Now come home. You know a woman's place is beside her husband." His mother nodded. "Every marriage has bruises, my daughter," she said softly. "Some are just not on the skin." I smiled. A small, sad smile. Because they didn't even realize how wrong that sounded. Then Daniel stepped closer and whispered, "You think freedom will love you the way I did?" I looked him in the eye, the same eyes I once adored, and said, "You didn't love me. You loved control. You called it culture, but it was just fear dressed in tradition." He tried to laugh it off, but my calm unsettled him. For years, I'd been the quiet one. Now my silence wasn't weakness, it was power. The pastor began to speak about forgiveness, about submission, about saving face. But I interrupted. For the first time, I didn't wait my turn. "Forgiveness isn't returning to what broke you," I said. "It's walking away and choosing peace over performance." He stared at me, shocked. I continued, "You didn't marry a wife, Daniel. You built a mirror that reflected your power." I just stopped standing in front of it. He stood there, searching my face for the woman who used to flinch at his anger. but she was gone. After they left, I closed the door gently and exhaled. Not just air, but years of suffocation. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and whispered. He called it culture. I called it control. And today I chose my own tradition, peace. Months later, I saw him at an industry event. He looked thinner, distracted. Our eyes met across the room. He gave a small, awkward smile. I smiled back, not out of nostalgia, but closure. I walked away that day with no guilt, no anger, just peace. Because I finally understood I wasn't disobedient. I was free,